My name is Victoria Scott. I'm a family mediator operating a sole practice in North London. Actually, although the learning curve hasn't been one that I would wish on anyone, I now really relish online mediations, and I think there are certain advantages to online mediations which I hadn't really appreciated.
The thing that has transformed my practice has been Zoom child inclusive mediation. I was fairly skeptical about child inclusive mediation before lockdown. My mindset was always we need a very good reason to be offering this, and it has to pertain to moving mediation forward. My mindset has changed from that to we need a very good reason not to be offering this, and the right of the child to have a voice in the mediation process has come up to the risen to the top as opposed to being somewhere down in the middle. And I think what started it for me was my experience on FaceTime with the granddaughter. Subliminally, what happened was it occurred to me that they really liked FaceTime because they were in control. The length of the conversation was up to them. They were in their own home. And if they got fed up with me, they'd go, "Okay, I'm going now, Nanma, bye." And they seemed so comfortable with that process that it seemed a natural extension to be able to offer that in mediation.
So the biggest revelation of working online of the lockdown is the change it's given to the accessibility of this process to young people. Is that right?
Yes.
I'm Louise Goldsborough, a mediator working in Leamington Spa. I completed the foundation training in February 2020, so I should appreciate I have very limited experience of mediation before the pandemic, and like everyone, I've been trying to work through all the changes in the last 18 months and keep pace with those. I think my area of focus really, as I continue to develop my style of mediation, is to work on the client experience. I think what I've learned is that people come into mediation with very different expectations, very different ways of working. Some very much embrace technology, others shy away from it, but it's trying to make mediation accessible. In each case, understanding the process might need to adapt so that you can work to the pace that clients feel comfortable with, work to their preferences in terms of ways of working, whether that be online or face-to-face. And I think feedback is also crucial in that, trying to make sure that we reflect upon whether we met those expectations from the clients and how we can continue to move forward.
What's the impact on the parents of doing it this way, and what are the outcomes been?
The impact on the parents has been relief. Primarily, it's been relief. And again, that wasn't what I was taught was the purpose of child inclusive mediation. I was always taught only offer it if in some way it's going to move the mediation forward. What I didn't gather was that relief from the parents does do that.
Yes.
They don't hear anything major. In my experience, they haven't heard anything major. What they've heard is reinforcement that they're doing enough right that it's worth keeping on going.
My name is Ashley and I am a child inclusive family mediator. So generally loving working and being in this position of being privileged to potentially change three people's future of how they behave around each other, and particularly the child's experience of it. And the good ones are when people come into you in an intake meeting full of animosity, full of resentment and blame, and then you start talking to them and doing the assessment meeting, but equally bringing in the child to the focus, and you just see the change in the way they speak. You see them seeing things from a different perspective, possibly, even if it's this much. It's the opening the door to, is there another way to do this, rather than the volume that are still coming through the door that are using courts and courts and courts instead. I'm loving the fact that FMC have taken on Family Mediation Week to get more people understanding what family mediation is, because they really, I find that people still don't know.
Hi, my name is Smera. I'm a mediator based in Bradford and I am currently working towards accreditation. This time last year at the conference, there was a discussion and that prompted me to contact Sarah Collins and join the EDIT group. For those of you that don't know, EDIT stands for Equality, Diversity and Inclusion team. And I think it was from the Black Lives Matter movement that prompted those discussions. And then from there, the FMC were interested in the work that we were doing. We have an FMC EDIT working group, which has led to having more detailed discussions and a lot of actions to go out in the community to see what work we can further do. Not only that, but we've also got discussions in terms of a young mediators group that's come out of that. Just to be part of that, something that started off small in terms of the FMA conference from last year, to see where we are now in 2021. I'm really happy and I'm really excited about the future, about where we can go with the EDIT work that we have been doing.
And I think during lockdown, one of the things that I did struggle with was the feeling of isolation. I think as a sole mediator, I always have that as a struggle, but lockdown obviously exacerbated that for everybody across the board. So the other thing that really enthuses me as a mediator is that I facilitate an informal pod of around 10 women mediators, and we meet informally online. We are actually due to have a face-to-face meeting now that we're able to, and that's been just glorious, to share cases, to ask for advice, to just rage and laugh together. So if I had any advice to anybody, it would be as a mediator, to make connections, because I've certainly found that in making connections, you support each other, but you also can make lifelong friends.
Enjoying the amazing amount of training we can do in our homes, much cheaper, quicker. I mean, conferences, training, all of that so available now, rather than having to travel all around the country to particular trains you want to go to. So I'm feeling really positive about the difference in this mediation world and the learning that we can do.
The idea of an alliance for supporting separating families, the SSFA, arose from the work done by the Private Law Working Group, the PLWG, which was set up in February 2019 to look at how to improve the Child Arrangements Programme. The PLWG considered the research which shows that conflict between parents is harmful to children, and that although parents don't always have the necessary skills to successfully co-parent, for families who do not raise safety issues, this is a social and not a justice issue. The PLWG recognised that many services exist for families, but work independently of one another in silos. Hence the idea of forming local alliances for all who work with the families who separate, legal and non-legal, for adults and children. And the first SSFA meeting for Kent was held in Anchorage House in December 2019. The premise was to provide early intervention support and information for families via a local or virtual family separation network of support services, for example, mediation, relationship support, family therapy, domestic abuse, support for children, divorce recovery workshops, SPIPs, and other things. After the first SSFA meeting in Kent, a steering group of 6 members was formed, and we were put in charge of building the website, drafting the constitution, opening a bank account, and endeavouring to secure initial funding. With contributions from the voluntary sector in Kent, and in particular with help from a local charity, Dads Unlimited, and a young enthusiastic barrister, we drafted a website which is now up and running. The website was to work so that those experiencing relationship breakdown were able to understand at a glance what the service was about. The hope was that many families could have their issues resolved with the relevant support, and only a few would need to be triaged out into the justice system. Going forward, we are hoping that our website will be the go-to website for separating families in Kent. It is all about breaking down silos to create a more integrated system. Our long-term goal is that our pilot scheme in Kent can be followed or built upon in every county so that we can create a national alliance of support for separating families.
Hello, my name is Emily Nixon-Williams. So my interest in mediation began when I was working in children's services for a Northern local authority. I held a number of key strategic positions and different roles over an 18-year period. And one of those roles was in the multi-agency screening service, as it was known then, which was essentially the children's services front door, where I oversaw the responses to referrals from an early help perspective. And what struck me were the number of referrals that would come in from separated parents. I thought, we need to do something about this. All of the difficulties that they are having is because of broken relationships. So following that, I embarked on a 5-year system change journey that led to a whole system change, in effect, in terms of how the local authority and partners responded to family relationship difficulties. As part of that journey, I trained as a mediator, and that skill set and that way of working I felt needed to be brought into the public sector, so that anybody that was already working with a family, a social worker, children's centre worker, family hub worker, for example, they could also offer an appropriate solution-focused restorative response. So using my many years of frontline experience and mediation training, I started to think about how we might develop more practical, structured responses for practitioners who would often say, you know, I want to help, I've got the skills, but I haven't got the tools. So we're already working with this family, what could I do? And that led me to think about what else we could do. So I started to develop resources. I started to write practical guides for practitioners to use so that they could respond in a solution-focused restorative way to family relationship difficulties with families that they were already working with. That became a passion. That was what I could see how effective that was. I could see that it worked. So that led me to leave the local authority, and I collaborated with a fellow relationship repair enthusiast, Kate Nicole, and together we created Amity Relationship Solutions. And we create resources. We create resources for anybody working with adults, with families experiencing conflict, whether they're separated or they're still together. I have personally overseen, and I've seen what's possible in the local authority. I've seen what's possible when a local authority and mediators work together, and I know it's possible to do elsewhere.
So obviously I've been at this quite a long time, although not as long as some, and my experience is of steps forward in mediation, fallow periods, new initiatives that go badly wrong, some that work when you don't expect them to work, and generally a bit of disappointment that we're not further forward in the profession than we might have hoped to be by now. But last year looked like it was going to be a big opportunity to move forward when we started to get our heads around working online, which was a huge change, and we've talked about this plenty of times. And the initiative that a number of us took to try to get government to take some emergency action to engage mediation and embed it better in the court process. And I suppose my reaction when what came out of that was a £500 voucher scheme was, this isn't great, but I've learned that actually the voucher scheme might well be a really big step forward for us all. It seems like it's been a huge step forward for clients. Mediators seem to have embraced it. It's still going on, so there's a momentum behind it. Interesting to see what the new Justice Minister will do with that. And I suppose especially some rather crude but very positive outcomes have come from it in terms of statistics that we can throw around. So there we are, something that was a change that we didn't necessarily hope for, but has probably had quite a positive impact. So great for that.
What might change look like moving forwards for us as a profession?
Well, I think perhaps building on what Neil was saying, it's got to be about us working together. And the voucher scheme grew out of a group of people. It was not my idea, but I was one of the group of people who incorporated it into a whole set of ideas that we were trying to promote last year during that opportunity for change. And something has happened with it. And I think it's so easy, especially when most of the things that one suggests haven't worked, to fall into a world in which nothing works. And the voucher scheme is a change, and whatever you think of its place in the mediation world, it's making something change. So I think that the future looks like all of us working together on as many ideas as we can and compromising where we need to in order to keep everybody with us. If we work as a united group of people, we can change things.